It was supposed to be a special night, a simple dinner to celebrate our second wedding anniversary. Alex and I had been planning it for weeks. I spent the entire day preparing our favorite meals, cleaning up the house, and trying my best to make everything perfect. But, as always, nothing ever goes according to plan when you have a family gathering. Alex's mom, Susan, was coming over. I'd never been able to get along with her. She had always been a little too critical, a little too controlling. No matter how much I tried to be polite and accommodating, it never felt like I could live up to her expectations. I'd heard the rumors from friends and family, whispers about how she thought I wasn't good enough for her son, how I didn't fit into their picture-perfect family. But I didn't want to let that ruin tonight. I thought, maybe this time, things would be different. Maybe Susan would see that I was doing my best, that I truly loved Alex, and that I wanted to be a part of their family. I had tried to push my insecurities aside, determined to make tonight work. The table was set beautifully, with candles flickering softly in the dim light. The scent of roasted chicken filled the air, and the wine glasses were perfectly placed beside our dinner plates. Everything was set for what should have been a peaceful evening. But of course, it wasn't that simple. We sat down to eat, and at first, everything was fine. We exchanged pleasantries, talked about work, and tried to keep things light. But as the evening wore on, Susan started asking more personal questions. At first, it was just about how Alex and I were doing, how our marriage was going. I answered as honestly as I could, trying to give her a glimpse into our lives. But then, without warning, the questions got more invasive. So, Susan asked with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, "How's the intimacy between you two? You know, keeping that spark alive." She leaned forward slightly, her gaze never leaving me. I froze. What was I supposed to say to that? I was taken aback. It wasn't just the question itself, but the way she asked it, so bluntly, without any regard for privacy or my comfort. Alex was sitting beside me, his face suddenly turning red. I could tell he was just as uncomfortable, but he didn't say anything. He never did when his mom went too far. I tried to brush it off with a laugh, to make it feel less awkward. "Oh, you know. It's fine," I said, forcing a smile. "We're doing okay." But that wasn't enough for Susan. She pushed further. "Really? Just okay? After 2 years of marriage?" Her voice took on an almost accusatory tone. "I mean, surely you must still be attracted to him, right?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This wasn't a conversation I wanted to have. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, looking down at my plate. What was I supposed to say? I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to start a huge argument either. Before I could find the right words, I heard myself say it, "I'm not attracted to him." The words tumbled out before I could stop them, and the moment they left my lips, I knew it was a mistake. The room went deathly silent. I looked up at Alex, and his face had drained of all color. His eyes were wide with shock, his mouth slightly open as if he couldn't believe what he had just heard. His mother, on the other hand, looked like she had just caught me in a lie, like I had committed some unthinkable sin. Susan's expression twisted into something I couldn't quite place. Was it anger? Disappointment? It was as if she had just witnessed the final proof that I wasn't worthy of her son. She opened her mouth to say something, but no words came out at first. "How could you say that?" she finally managed, her voice sharp and cutting. "You're married to him. You're supposed to love him, be attracted to him, not say things like that." Alex just stared at me, his face a mixture of confusion and hurt. I wanted to take the words back, to scream that I didn't mean it the way it sounded, that I had just blurted it out without thinking, but it was too late. The damage was done. I could feel the weight of her judgment pressing down on me, and it was suffocating. Alex didn't say anything. He just stood up, excused himself, and walked out of the room, leaving me sitting there with my mother-in-law, who now seemed more like a stranger than a family member. I sat in stunned silence for what felt like an eternity, the reality of what I had just done sinking in. How could I have been so stupid? How could I have said something so hurtful? I had ruined everything, and there was no going back. The days that followed were a blur of awkward silences and empty rooms. I didn't hear from Alex at all after he left the dinner that night. My mind replayed that moment over and over, each time feeling like a fresh wound reopening. I couldn't believe what I had said. How could I have been so careless with my words? It was as if the thoughtless sentence had triggered an avalanche, and I couldn't stop it from crushing everything in its path. I tried to reach out to him. I called his phone several times, but it went straight to voicemail every time. I left messages, apologies, explanations, promises that I hadn't meant it the way it sounded, that it was just a slip of the tongue, but it was like I was talking to a wall. The silence from his end was deafening. Days turned into a week, and nothing changed. Alex didn't come home. He didn't reply to my messages. It was as though he had vanished from my life entirely. I spent every waking hour thinking about what I had done, but it didn't seem to matter. I could try to explain myself 1,000 times, but the damage had been done. And then there was his mother. She didn't hold back. She was relentless. She began calling my phone, her voice sharp and accusatory each time. "How could you say that about my son?" she would ask, her tone dripping with disdain. "Do you even love him at all?" I couldn't answer her, couldn't find the words to explain the chaos I had caused. Every time she called, I felt my heart sink a little deeper. She would spread her version of events to anyone who would listen, telling them that I had disrespected her son, that I had humiliated him in front of his family. Her voice echoed in my mind, making me question everything. My own family, too, started to feel the weight of it. My parents reached out, their voices filled with concern. They wanted to know what happened, why I had said something so hurtful. They were worried about Alex and about how things had spiraled out of control so quickly. I tried to explain, but they didn't understand. How could they? I couldn't even understand myself. It wasn't just the people around me who were affected, it was me too. The shame I felt was suffocating. I couldn't look anyone in the eye without feeling like I was carrying the weight of their judgment. The way my friends looked at me changed. The way Alex's family treated me changed. It was like I had become a completely different person in their eyes, someone who didn't deserve any sympathy, let alone forgiveness. The worst part, though, was seeing the way Alex withdrew. He used to be the person I could talk to, the one who would reassure me when I was feeling insecure or lost. But now, there was nothing but cold distance between us. When I finally saw him again, it was only in passing. He had come by to pick up some things from the apartment, his eyes dark with frustration and pain. He didn't say a word to me. Not a single word. He just grabbed his stuff and left, and that was the last time I saw him. That was when it hit me, he was gone. The man I had married, the man I had once felt so connected to, was slipping away, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. I didn't know if I should feel relief, guilt, or a strange mixture of both. But I felt lost. I felt alone. I had destroyed everything. I had pushed him away, and now he was gone, along with the future we had built together. Every morning, I woke up hoping it had all been a nightmare, hoping I could rewind time and take back the hurtful words I had spoken. But the silence that greeted me each day made it clear that my reality had changed forever. I thought things couldn't get any worse, but as the days turned into weeks, I realized just how wrong I was. The ripple effect of that one comment had spread far beyond the dinner table, touching every part of my life, and I couldn't escape it. The weight of my actions pressed down on me more heavily each day, and I began to wonder if I would ever be able to fix what I had broken. It wasn't just the silence from Alex that stung, it was the judgment from everyone else, too. I had assumed that people would understand my side, that they would see I hadn't meant it the way it sounded. But no one seemed to care about my explanation. They were too caught up in the drama, too consumed by their own feelings about what I had said. Susan, of course, was the loudest critic. Every time I ran into her, which seemed to happen more often than I would have liked, she made sure to remind me of my mistake. "You ruined my son's life," she would say with venom in her voice. "You don't deserve him. How could you ever say something like that about him?" Each word hit me like a slap in the face, and I felt smaller with every encounter. Her words were cruel, but they were also laced with something deeper: disappointment. The disappointment of a mother who had hoped her son had married someone who would cherish him, who would never dream of hurting him. And here I was, the woman she had warned him about, the one who had made the ultimate mistake. But it wasn't just Alex's mother who was alienating me, it was the people I had once considered friends. It wasn't unusual for me to receive messages or phone calls from them, checking in, offering support, or simply chatting. But now, the messages stopped coming. The calls went unanswered. The few friends who had still reached out did so out of obligation, not because they genuinely cared. I knew the truth. They saw me differently now. They didn't trust me, didn't believe I was the person they once thought I was. I had tarnished my own reputation, and I couldn't undo that. The hurtful words I had uttered were like a stain I couldn't wash away, no matter how hard I tried. The isolation was suffocating. I spent more and more time alone in our apartment, staring at the empty spaces where Alex's belongings used to be, wondering if this was my new reality. The life we had planned together seemed so distant, like a dream I had once had but could never return to. And the hardest part was knowing that I had no one to blame but myself. I had caused all of this. I had made a choice, however rash and impulsive, and now I had to live with the consequences. Every day felt like a struggle to find meaning in the emptiness that had replaced my life. I would replay the events of that night in my head, trying to find some explanation for why I had said what I did. I could convince myself all day long that it was a slip of the tongue, that I hadn't meant it, that I loved Alex more than anything. But it didn't matter. The damage had been done, and no amount of regret would change that. The saddest part was that I didn't know if Alex would ever forgive me. I had tried reaching out to him, sending messages, leaving voicemails, but each attempt had been met with silence. It was as though he had disappeared from my life completely. The person I thought I knew, the man I had spent so much time with, had become a stranger to me. And now, I had no way of finding my way back to him. And yet, despite everything, I couldn't give up. I still loved him. I still believed in what we had. But how could I expect him to come back, to open his heart to me again, when I had been the one to close it first? The harsh reality was that love alone wasn't enough to fix the damage I had caused. It wasn't enough to heal the wounds I had inflicted. I had no choice but to face the aftermath of my actions. And as the days went on, I realized that maybe the hardest part wasn't losing Alex, it was losing myself in the process. It had been weeks since Alex and I last spoke, and though I had tried to keep myself busy with work and other distractions, the weight of the situation never seemed to leave me. Every corner of my life felt empty without him, without us. I had reached the point where I could no longer deny it. I missed him more than I had ever thought possible. I missed our conversations, our laughter, the comfort of knowing he was there beside me. But I also knew something deeper now. I had to fix things. I couldn't just let everything end like this. It wasn't just about the relationship with Alex anymore, it was about redeeming myself, proving that I wasn't the person I had shown myself to be in that moment of weakness. One Saturday afternoon, when the weather was unusually warm for the time of year, I found myself wandering through the park, trying to clear my head. The days had started to blur together, but the fresh air felt like it could somehow ease my mind. The park had always been a place where Alex and I would go when we needed space to talk, to think, or simply to relax. It felt strange to be there alone, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed something, a sign, a reason to keep fighting for him, for us. As I walked past the fountain, lost in my thoughts, I nearly bumped into someone. Startled, I looked up, and my heart skipped a beat. There, standing in front of me, was Alex. For a moment, neither of us said anything. We just stared at each other, the silence hanging between us like an impenetrable wall. I could see the hurt in his eyes, the frustration, and the sadness. It was as if we had both been living in separate worlds, never knowing how to bridge the gap that had formed between us. "Alex," I finally said, my voice shaking. I didn't expect to see you here." He didn't respond immediately. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. For a long time, he had been the one person I could read effortlessly, the person whose thoughts and emotions were so familiar to me. But now, everything felt different. The person in front of me was a stranger, a person I had hurt, a person I had failed. "I didn't think I'd see you either," he finally muttered, his voice flat. "What are you doing here?" "I just needed to get out of the apartment," I said, my words feeling hollow even to my own ears. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About us. About what happened." He raised an eyebrow, clearly skeptical. "And what do you think happened?" His tone was colder than I had ever heard it before, and it stung more than I expected. "I messed up," I admitted, taking a deep breath. "I know I did. And I can't take back what I said. I know I hurt you. But I need you to know that it wasn't how I feel. It was a moment of stupidity. And I've been paying for it ever since." Alex remained silent for a long time, his eyes studying me as though he was trying to decide if I was telling the truth. It felt like an eternity before he spoke again. "Do you think that makes it better?" he asked, his voice soft but filled with something I couldn't quite place. "Do you think a simple apology is enough to fix this?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "No. I don't think it's enough. But it's all I can give. I faltered, not knowing how to express what I was feeling. I just want a chance to make things right. To prove that I'm not the person I showed you that night." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "It's not just about that night, you know," he said, his voice softer now, almost vulnerable. "It's about everything else. It's about the trust that's been broken. The things I can't unhear. It's about how you made me feel, like I wasn't enough. And that's not something I can just forget." I nodded, tears threatening to spill from my eyes. "I know," I whispered. "I know I can't fix everything. But I want to try. Please, Alex. Please give me the chance." For a long moment, he didn't say anything, and I wondered if I had pushed too hard, if I had lost my chance for good. But then, slowly, he stepped closer, his eyes still filled with a mix of anger and sorrow. "I don't know if I can forgive you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "But maybe we can start over. One step at a time." My heart leaped in my chest as his words washed over me. It wasn't the full forgiveness I had hoped for, but it was a start. And for the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken. The weeks that followed our unexpected encounter were a whirlwind of emotions. It was as though a fragile thread had been reconnected between Alex and me, and we were both treading carefully, afraid it might snap again. I didn't expect everything to be fixed overnight, but there was a sense of hope in the air, something I hadn't felt in a long time. We started taking small steps, conversations that weren't about the past but rather about what we could still share. We went for walks, had quiet dinners, and even watched a movie together on one of those rare evenings when we both had the time. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Each moment we spent together felt like we were slowly starting to rebuild the connection we had once had. It was like learning to trust again, but this time, I knew I couldn't take that trust for granted. I had already hurt him once, and I wasn't about to let it happen again. Alex's responses to my attempts at reconciliation were tentative at first. He didn't want to dive straight into the deep end, and I couldn't blame him for that. He had been hurt, and trust, once broken, took time to heal. But the longer we spent together, the more we began to remember what had made us happy in the first place. The laughter, the inside jokes, the way we could talk for hours without ever running out of things to say, those were the things that began to resurface, one by one. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were moments when the weight of the past would come crashing down on us, and the tension between us would grow thick again. There were nights when I would lay awake, wondering if I had done enough, if I had shown him that I was truly sorry. I knew the hurt I had caused couldn't just be erased with a few nice gestures or words. I had to prove that I was willing to put in the effort, not just for a few weeks but for as long as it took. It wasn't until a month later, when we found ourselves sitting on the same bench in the park where we had first run into each other, that I realized how much things had truly changed. The sky was painted with the colors of dusk, the air cooler than it had been that afternoon. It felt like everything had slowed down, like time itself was allowing us this moment to breathe, to think, to just exist together. "You know," Alex said softly, "I've been thinking a lot. About everything. About us." I looked at him, my heart racing. "What about us?" He took a deep breath, looking away for a moment as if he was collecting his thoughts. "I don't know if I'll ever fully forget what happened. And I don't expect you to either. But I think I'm ready to move forward. To see where we can go from here." My heart soared, but I was cautious, knowing that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not the end of the story. "Do you really think it's possible for us to start fresh?" Alex smiled softly, the first real smile I had seen in weeks. "I think we have a chance. But it's going to take work. And it's going to take patience. But if we're both willing to try, I think we can make it." I couldn't help but let a tear slip down my cheek, not out of sadness, but because I realized something in that moment. We had made it through. We had faced the toughest part, the reckoning, and now, we were standing on the other side, ready to rebuild. "I'm willing to try," I whispered, my voice full of emotion. "I don't want to lose you again." "You won't," he said, taking my hand in his. "We'll take it one day at a time." And with those words, everything changed. We both knew that we couldn't undo the past, but we could shape our future. There was no magic fix, no way to erase the hurt or the pain. But there was love, real, imperfect, and resilient, and that was enough to keep us going. As the night grew darker and the first stars began to appear, we sat there together, not knowing what the future would hold, but knowing that whatever it was, we would face it side by side. And for the first time in a long while I felt peace. I had made a mistake, yes, but I was ready to make things right. And Alex, despite everything, was willing to give us a second chance. That, in itself, was more than I could have ever hoped for.